Well, most of Europe is fairly convinced of the existence of God, but here, belief in God almost goes without saying.
I grew up in a culture where the tenets and practices of Catholicism were still very much ingrained. I was baptised, and although my family were not wholly religious, we attended Sunday Mass. I attended an all-girls Catholic Irish school, had my Holy Communion at 7 years old, participated in nativity plays each Christmas, and sat in a confession box at the age of 11 to confess my sins to a priest. I don't know what sins I thought I had back then, but it felt like an exciting milestone at the time. A lot of my early school memories are steeped in evangelism, singing hymns about Christ our Lord, and nervously bringing a piece of paper to the altar to recite a prayer. The importance of conformity was made clear through religious practices. You had to remember to kneel before a bench and know when to bless yourself or shake someone's hand, and respond to ceremonial cues by standing up, sitting down, or kneeling. I quickly discovered that if you didn't know what was going on, then you were safe to just copy everybody else. I was a curious child, concerned with life and death and what things meant, but it wasn't long before parables about fish and bread and wine and the meaning of Advent and the significance of the colour purple became fragmented memories tied up in the same part of my brain that learned about division and how to write in cursive. None of the teachings about old people from 2,000 years ago and their moral conflictions resonated with me. And as soon as I neared adulthood, it felt like I'd graduated from the whole thing, and the role of religion in my life dissipated.
Many of us are wondering where it's all going to end.
It is the duty of a republic to be willing to hold itself to account, to be willing to confront hard truths and accept parts of our history which are deeply uncomfortable.
Then, like many others, I grew up and learned about the oppression of the state and the wrongdoings of the Catholic Church, and formed some resentments towards an institution that so heavily governed how I grew up. More recently in my life, Catholicism has manifested itself in a way that's surprising to me, and that's through memes.
I'm tipping, wood grain, I'm gripping, catch me line switching with the paint drip.
Okay.
Holy Spirit, activate.
Oh no.
Holy Spirit,
no. Oh, no.
activate. Holy Spirit, activate. Activate.
In this video, I'm going to explore how Catholicism became a meme and an online aesthetic. To do this, I'm going to briefly cover the role of Catholicism in fashion and how it's evolved. From women dressing modestly to mainstream culture now, where celebrities like Addison Rae are sporting bikinis inspired by the Holy Trinity and handbags labelled God's favourite, in what feels like a very post-ironic fashion statement. Addison received backlash and criticism for making fun of the Catholic religion, and while it may appear blasphemous to many, I think it's important to further dissect this trend, where it came from and what it means. In order to do this, I'm going to explore the prevalence of Catholicism within pop culture and the resurgence of Catholicism through memes, because this trend of holiness as an aesthetic is very much rooted in the popularity of meme pages like @INeedGod in every moment of my life, who set up their merch store secondary to the success of their meme account. I'm going to conclude with my thoughts about this trend because while the fashion pieces are being presented as a negative religious appropriation of sorts, I believe that overall the memeification of Catholicism is a positive thing, and that there is a surprisingly powerful element to reclaiming the notion of religion through memes.
Shut up. Shut up. Oh my gosh. Are you kidding me? This is crazy. I feel like I'm gonna cry.
The role of Catholicism in fashion typically presented itself through its values. The Catholic Church has always taught that the way of dressing should meet three conditions: the needs of hygiene, modesty, and decorum. Modesty is a word that comes from the word modus, a measure or limit. From a Catholic perspective, it means maintaining the moral integrity of a person to keep her from arousing sensual desires in others. The word decorum comes from the word dignity and means a way of being and manner appropriate to the dignity of your condition as a child of God. Catholicism is also presented more overtly through clothing. For example, habits have become symbols of the church and have inspired a number of fashion trends. In the 1960s, mini skirts and dresses with high collars and long sleeves were popular and were often referred to as nuns' habits. Traditional Christian symbolism such as rosaries and crucifixes have influenced fashion trends since their inception. The dialogue between Christianity and high fashion is active and elaborate still. In 2018, the theme of the Met Gala was Heavenly Bodies, Fashion and the Catholic Imagination, and as the title suggests, the display examined the influence of Catholicism on clothing. While some attendees paid vague tributes with cross motifs and ornate jewels, other guests went all out. Rihanna wore a papal outfit, Greta Gerwig wore a nun-like ensemble, Ariana Grande enveloped in a gown printed with the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and Zendaya wore literal armour inspired by Joan of Arc. But even though the Vatican had approved of the exhibit and even lent the Met Museum about 50 garments and accessories for the show, some Catholics felt the event appropriated their religion into a fashion statement, calling it sacrilegious and offensive to their faith. However, for over 2 millennia, Christianity has dictated what's hot in the wardrobe department. Before couturiers became our style pundits, priests and pontiffs played a vital role. Costumes of royal families served as symbols not only of a nation, but of the church as well. This created an indelible bond between fashion, religion and elitism, one that has been upheld by Catholicism in particular.
It articulates the differences, primarily through colour, that establishes that hierarchy.
The sacred link between fashion and religion has been built throughout history, and a world of powerful images and symbolism is now admired by new generations. This divine ascension has been baptized by the internet as Christian core. It stands as a new cultural phenomenon that drinks from the Christian iconography as an act of faith or blasphemy, depending on how you interpret it. But often, internet culture is inspired by pop culture, and within pop culture, Christianity and its symbolism has been utilised for decades. Its beautiful aesthetic, emotional power, and of course its propensity to stir up controversy makes it a great tool for publicity. The cover for Halsey's album, If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power, was inspired by artistic depictions of the Virgin Mary. An article published in The Spectator argued that Halsey's use of Catholic imagery and themes should be considered offensive and/or on par with cultural appropriation. Halsey simply responded with a photo of herself at her First Communion, meaning she is or was a practicing Catholic. She previously said that the image on her album cover was meant to depict the idea that her as a sexual being and her body as a vessel and a gift to her child are concepts that can coexist peacefully and powerfully. This idea of embracing Catholic religion in a sort of contrarian and personal way is a controversial yet somewhat common theme. As of late, there's been a newfound interest in Catholicism that seems to be born out of a sense of rebellion, of consciously being at variance with modernity. And for this same reason, Christianity has been reclaimed by goth subcultures for decades. As of 2021, Kourtney Kardashian and Travis Barker successfully positioned themselves as Hollywood's hottest goth couple, and their evangelist gothic wedding, which took place along the Italian Riviera, did everything to elevate that image in the public eye. Kourtney wore a bespoke D&G corseted wedding dress with a trailing veil featuring a hand-embroidered depiction of the Virgin Mary and the words "family, loyalty, respect," inspired by one of her husband's tattoos. On a separate day, she wore another gothic bride mini dress again, with a Virgin Mary image stitched on. The family followed suit with this trend of using Catholic iconography, as Khloe, Kim and Kendall all wore large crucifixes. While the Kardashians are Christian, their use of this type of jewellery was uncoincidentally exclusive to Kourtney's wedding, as to stay on theme and fit into her desired aesthetic for the day. Teen Noir did a really great video about how Kim is finally embracing her whiteness. Interestingly, as part of this transition, she also seems to be leaning more into Catholic symbolism, and most recently purchased Princess Diana's amethyst cross necklace for just under $200,000. The prevalence of Catholicism is also observed in modern TV and literature. The Catholic imagination is latently presented in Sally Rooney's book Normal People in the way that Rooney writes about the body. The back cover of this globally acclaimed book is a quote from Marianne which says, "I'm not a religious person, but I do sometimes think God made you for me." This concept of not being a religious person but identifying with God or the existence of God is something that I think is resonating with a lot of young people who feel burned by the Catholic Church. In Euphoria's Halloween scene, Jules is dressed as the tragic but love-struck Juliet from the 90s Romeo and Juliet, a kind of fallen angel who gives herself to love. Kat, on the other hand, is dressed as a sexy nun, which is allegedly a reference to the movie MS-45. But I want to talk about Euphoria actress Chloe Cherry, because she is someone who truly leans into this trend of using Catholicism as an aesthetic, mainly when she's off screen. Chloe has worked with the controversial brand prayingg. Prayingg is the brand that created the bikini that Addison received backlash for wearing back in August of 2022. Other celebrities also spotted wearing the brand prayingg include Meg Thee Stallion, Charlie XCX and Christina Aguilera. But I feel like Chloe Cherry is a good person to isolate when we talk about this trend, because she feels like the embodiment of someone who is chronically online and has built her image around being a spectacle of sorts. She has the Tumblr-esque vibe of Alison Harvard in 2013, and while Alison's pictures featured a heroin chick look as well as an odd fascination with blood, Chloe's aesthetic leans more into today's trends such as overt bimbification,
all I wanted to be was like a bimbo,
Y2K fashion and bold slogan tees steeped in irony. Days magazine described her aesthetic as part of the elusive, confusing and seductive world of post-ironic femininity, which has washed over our Instagram feeds. Chloe grew up in a conservative part of Pennsylvania, and when she was 18 she moved to Miami and went into the adult entertainment industry. In a recent interview she alluded to the fact that her religious upbringing and the oppressive attitudes towards sex invoked a curiosity in her that led her to working in the industry. Chloe wearing a brand like prayingg is really a statement, because she grew up within religious confines, and now she's wearing a brand that seemingly subverts religious code, and in doing so elevates her own personal brand. It might seem like a big FU to religion, but as controversial as it sounds, the notion that she might be wearing something like this with the intent of reclaiming her religion in her own sort of way is not something that should be ruled out.
Do you guys know where I could get one of those gold necklaces with a T on it? That's a cross.
A cross from where?
To me, many of the items of clothing feel like the Memeification of Catholicism, but behind the facade, it is a very clever curation of an aesthetic. Examples of I need God in every moment of my life's items are t-shirts with slogans such as "Prayer is whatever you say on your knees," "God won't let me die," "I love being Catholic," and various Bible verses. The brand features collections including, more controversially, Prayboy, which merges a Playboy bunny visual with praying hands. There's also an I Need God girl blogger collaboration collection. The landing page here parallels a Tumblr or MySpace page. It's clearly been designed to be an experience. There's an audio embedded on the page, which is the song Ride by Lana Del Rey. There's also a low-quality rain animation and a visual of a cigarette stumped out on a Bible. Within this collection, the t-shirts include slogans such as, "My favourite artist is God because he created me." This is very much reminiscent of the Dolls Mania widgets of the early 2000s, when people would unironically write things like "baddest bitch" and "I am sexy" in their MySpace bios. It may come off as blatant narcissism to anyone who isn't chronically online, but the whole thing has a very nostalgic feel to it, and imitates internet culture back in the early 2000s when people like Paris Hilton, Lindsay Lohan and Britney Spears dominated the media. The idea of being blindly in love with yourself is in again. Prayingg.com is the other popular site that I mentioned, which has been controversial in the media. When we take a little look at their website, it's also clearly been designed to be reminiscent of an old school girl blog. It's very minimalist and MySpace-esque. There's tacky flashing widgets, and unlike most websites, it's not very slick. And that's not because it's low effort, it's because it's playing into a very specific aesthetic. The photo shoots are also pretty rogue. In this photo, there's an old dishwasher and an old school remote control in the girl's hand while she models these holy headphone covers. One of Prayingg's co-founders told Hyson Abadi, "What we're trying to do is say things and show images that have two meanings. A lot of the time these meanings are competitive. They can be ironic or completely sincere. It is a way of using nihilism to move past nihilism." Other examples of Catholicism as an online aesthetic include Instagram filters. There's tons of depictions of Jesus, angelic type filters and stylized Renaissance filters, many of which give users a mini brow lift and 2 mils of lip filler. Many Catholics are outraged by these depictions of Catholicism online.
Genuinely is promoting Satanism. Satanism is the religion that creates, that puts man in God's place. Like
Jesus Christ did not take nails in his hands and a spear in his side and a crown of thorns on his head, playing around with sin.
But to truly understand the intent of these brands and their supporters, it's important to realise that these clothes are a result of an online meme movement. And the trend of Catholic memes, from my research, is not rooted in malevolence. In fact, it has inspired a plethora of creators across the digital realm to create and to feel inspired. At I Need God in Every Moment of My Life is an account which documents surreal absurdist memes about God, often with a Catholic bent. Kyle Hyde, the founder, along with 3 friends that he met on Twitter in the mid-2010s, compiled bizarre imagery mixing internet culture with the divine, the sincerity of which their followers can never quite agree on. The truth is somewhere between irony and earnestness, but leans towards the latter. Hyde was raised Catholic, even serving as a cantor in the choir. When talking about his motivation for creating the account, he says, "I was trying to separate what I didn't like about Catholicism from what is fun about it. What motivates me is an awareness of God, or a provocation to make people think about their beliefs and a higher power." Before the pandemic, the account had only a few thousand followers, and is now at 105k. Hyde attributes the growth in part to quarantine. "Being home alone without your routine makes you confront your faith, or other deeper things that society isn't dealing with," he said. At I Need God in Every Moment of My Life has found devotees of all types, from extremely online millennials and zoomers to religious academics and, as Hyde describes, Christian dads with like Ezekiel 35 in their bios. The page shares totally unfiltered posts very regularly, and funnels pretty much anything regarding faith, prayer and God into multiple carousel posts. The memes can be perceived as funny, inspiring, stupid or offensive, but the common denominator is that there is a link to faith and or God. And while the messaging on the clothing might be controversial, it's important to understand the context, which is that the tees and the slogans are steeped in post-irony, and are part of a larger post-ironic meme movement. The ironic meme movement is a reaction against the mainstream co-option of the subcultural products of the underground, an attempt to create incorruptible inside jokes. Post-irony is a term used to denote a state in which earnest and ironic intent become muddled. Usually one's ironic appreciation of something becomes genuine due to either prolonged exposure or the enjoyment derived from how amusing it is. It may have initially started out as a joke, but as it's perpetuated, you get sincerity. In this context, the page at I Need God in Every Moment of My Life may be, accidentally or not, perpetuating a sincere and positive outlook on the Catholic faith. The new wave of memes from creators like I Need God have a comedic slant, but there are other creators posting about divinity and holiness that are more overtly genuine. One of my favourite accounts, I Am That Witch, would have an audience overlap with I Need God, and she creates posts about being in awe of nature, art, the creative process and divinity. Another overlapping community with I Need God is at Fucking Sober, who creates lighthearted content for people in addiction recovery. This parallels with I Need God's AI Anonymous collection, which features tote bags and tees inspired by the Serenity Prayer, a prayer said in AA and would be well recognised within recovery circles. These people are not necessarily poking fun at religion in an evil or malicious way. They are just consuming it through a medium which makes sense for them. Life is already serious and difficult at the best of times. If someone wants to log into Instagram and have their religious inclinations reflected to them through weird and stupid memes, then so be it. Not only that, but many of I Need God's posts take content from creators like Girl Defined and other serious Catholic accounts and funnel it through their account, where they reach larger, more mainstream audiences than these niche religious communities would reach on their own.
Church, it is addressing some of the issues that young people are involved in, such as sex, drugs and rock and roll, but it's not addressing them in a language that the young people can identify with.
And while you could argue that the context of the content is being somewhat bastardized under the guise of perceived irony, the message is still being shared. Chris Stedman, a writer and professor of religion, noticed a renewed interest in Catholic aesthetics amongst young people, both in the edgy, grungy expressions of meme accounts or the trad cath aesthetics of fairy tales, angels and royalty. I think a lot of us are experiencing the benefits and the power of being able to leave or reject institutions that aren't serving us and go our own way, said Stedman. Anytime that there's some significant technological advancement, there is gain, but there is also loss. It's really natural to say, I'm going to try and reclaim this older way of doing things. Founder of I Need God, Kyle Hite, said, "The church I grew up in was so elaborate and beautiful, and there's something spiritual about that too. Decoration, ornamentation. The purpose of it is to supersede all things, and there's something comforting about that." People are finding inspiration in these accounts, and there has been a proliferation of meme-based art. God could be seen as being symbolic of creation, and memes, whether we like it or not, are today's most powerful tools of communication.
One of the main functions, one of the two main functions of the church is to preach the gospel. In other words, the church is in the communications business and has been from the very beginning.
The fact that they are being utilised to spread a religious message of any kind is in and of itself biblical, but in an ironic way, so not really biblical. But in a post-ironic way, so definitely kind of biblical. As of making this video, I Need God's account is currently shadow banned, and people are well within their right to find it and the clothes offensive. The movement was inevitably going to be viewed as blasphemous. Shitposting is ultimately designed to be offensive, and these accounts aren't necessarily picky about finding religious imagery that is earnest and pure. Stripping Catholicism of everything but its aesthetic, or boiling it down to a joke, is going to be viewed as offensive. But the fact that there is debate about whether it is a joke or not means that much of it is working as a genuine promotion of Catholicism. It depends on the person consuming the content, and that is the beauty of it.
And secondly, that television is the most important and powerful means of communication in the world of today, and is likely to become even more important and more powerful in the future. It's obviously important, therefore, that the church should understand this medium.
Since the 60s, there's been a modernisation in our society, a much more fast lifestyle opened up to an enormous amount of influences.
In a world where we're accustomed to being bombarded by constant advertising and trends that are so transient in their nature, the concept of God and religion is going to be alluring to some young people. Leaning into Catholicism could be viewed as a rejection of celebrity culture or influencer culture. This is observed in some of the memes which say things like, "God is the only one who influences me." Religion has always been a refuge. A narrative that offers meaning when science and rationality cannot. Fashion and memes are much the same. They offer an escape route, a means of disappearing into the imagination, where humour and beauty can be restorative. Perhaps the most compelling argument for the symbiosis between memes, fashion, and the Catholic imagination is their mutual propensity for storytelling. Creation, like Christianity, is anchored in the theme of rebirth, and invites its disciples on a journey of self-discovery through reinvention. Or maybe it's all just shits and giggles. If you made it this far into the video, I would really appreciate if you click like and subscribe if you would like to see more internet culture type topics.
Do you think he fully died, a death that he never deserved, playing around with sin?
Me. Featuring me.
Clap, clap your hands. Clap, 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 clap your hands. All right, we about to have some spiritual milk. To the left. Take a step of faith. Pray once this time. On the devil, let's stomp. On temptation, let's stomp. Bible slide real smooth. Now praise and shout. Woo! To the right. Take a step of faith. Jump out the boat. Right foot, let's go. Left foot, let's go. Bible slide now, y'all. Now it's time to get holy. Get right now. To the left. Take it to the grave and see it resurrect. Come alive this time. Right fist, 2 pumps. Left fist, 2 pumps. Don't look to the left. Don't look to the right. Backslide. Backslide.